This is Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology, and today we're talking here in this particular lecture about now what is happening after Occam and the way of the moderns, Via Moderna, and before the advent of modern philosophy with Descartes. So what is happening in this period, let's say from 1490 to 1550? Well, we can identify this 60-year period as a period in which civilization in the West really charted a new path. It's a breaking point of the old and the beginning of the new. So what's going on? Well, I learned as a kid that, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and I don't need to tell you what year he did this because I think you can finish that. But of course, he discovered the New World in 1492, and this brought about huge economic and political change. And we cannot do history of ideas as if it's just some guy's thinking this, and another guy thinks this, and another guy thinks this, and this guy thinks this concerning what another guy thinks. I mean, all that happens, but of course it happens in a culture, right? It happens in a context. And here, now at the end of the 15th century, we see the rise of mercantilism, right? Of trade, right? And then we have, again, a use of interest, usury. You might remember that in the Middle Ages, usury was thought to be a very bad thing. It was outlawed, right? The idea that one charges money for the use of money was considered to be theologically just plain wrong, going against biblical tradition, going against Christianity itself. So obviously it's pretty hard to be an entrepreneur when you can't leverage, right? You can't get access to dollars. And so we find here, in order to get Columbus over there to, well, of course he wasn't heading for North America, but that's where he got, right? In order to get Columbus over there, somebody had to put dollars down to make this happen. So this brought a different way of doing things, as now we have many explorers going out and finding vast amounts of wealth, and then we have the formation of the great shipping, the shipping houses, where huge amounts of money can be made if you can go out and finance an expedition and then come back with gold and a bunch of good stuff, right? So that's going on. The discovery of the New World and this new economic reality. Then in 1517, a very obscure German monk decided he wanted to debate on an issue, so he went over to the bulletin board there at the little college he taught. I was there last summer at that little bulletin board, and he advocated maybe talking about a number of theses. These are so-called 95 theses of Luther, right? And we record, commemorate, if you will, the birth of the Reformation to October 31st, 1517. Well, I got to tell you, the idea of Luther going out with the hammer in the dead of the early morning and this great blow that changes all of civilization didn't really quite happen that way. Yes, he did post them. Nobody really cared. So then they did, of course, we had the beginning of the printing press right through here, so this was sent around then, and then we got some people engaged in the issue. What is the important thing for us right now? Well, the important thing here in the Reformation, as we move through this breaking point, is that ultimately we no longer need to submit to church teaching as holy and completely revelatory, right? Remember, Occam had claimed that reason cannot establish much of what theology is talking about and what the church is teaching, so one just had to believe it. The church teaches it, I believe it, and that settles it. And it's really ironic that some of the greatest minds in philosophy in this time had to retreat to that position, right? They had to retreat there in order to hang on to theology. Because the substance of theology was heteronymous to reason, right? There was no deep, profound connection between reason and the substance of the faith. And so now you had faith and reason in opposition. Well, Luther comes along and says, well, every person with their Bible, reading their Bible, has a judgment that, after all, could be the correct judgment. A person, a peasant, reading his Bible or her Bible can access the truth that prior to this time could only be accessible by people within the church, prelates and very important people, certainly not peasants. So this idea of the democratization of theological truth is just a tremendously powerful change agent in this period of time. 1543, a fellow by the name of Copernicus. I've been to his laboratory, actually, in Krakow. That was good. He published a little book called De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, which means on the revolution of the celestial bodies. And here he says, you know, it would really be simpler, if you will, to kind of chuck the Ptolemaic system and say, you know, maybe after all, it works out better mathematically, and it saves the appearances, right? It's consonant with empirical experience to think that the earth goes around the sun instead of the other way around. So this is hugely important, and I should at least tell you that, of course, Copernicus isn't the first guy that thought this. I mean, the idea that the so-called heliocentric hypothesis was known in ancient Greece. I mean, it's not like, oh, nobody thought of it. But here, we come back to the idea with some pretty sophisticated philosophical thoughts about what we're doing when we're asserting this. So these are the big three things happening, and I will come back to you and talk to you in a little more detail about all of this. I'm Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology. Thank you.